First place is on the line in the Southern Conference when the ETSU men's basketball team travels to Wofford tonight at 7 p.m. Hi, everybody. I am Marky Billson, and why shouldn't this be a game for first place in the SoCon? These are the two programs that have won the Southern Conference in both of the last two seasons. Of course, ETSU, with a 30-victory season last year, were able to win the Southern Conference. The year before that, Wofford had a nationally ranked team behind Fletcher McGee that took a game in the NCAA tournament against Seton Hall before falling to Kentucky, because basically McGee laid an egg in the game, and the Wildcats and not the Terriers went on to the Sweet 16. Wofford's a 1.5-point favorite, and I'm a little surprised by that because ETSU comes in my opinion, the hotter team. I don't think it's in my opinion. They are the hotter team. The ETSU Buccaneers have won 4 in a row. They're coming off a huge victory, 112-84 last Saturday against the Citadel. Meanwhile, the Citadel beat Wofford last week by the score of 77-69. That was because the Bulldogs were able to hit their threes, essentially. They also were a little bit more rested than were the Wofford Terriers, and that's something to consider because Jason Shea, ETSU's head coach, was able to play his entire roster in such a lopsided Buccaneers victory back on Saturday. Meanwhile, on Saturday, Wofford, in their previous game, they defeated a fairly decent Mercer team, 72-69, but Mercer's a middle-of-the-road SoCon team. On top of that, the Jay McCauley, who is, of course, Wofford's head coach, he had to play 3 of his starters 30 or more minutes, so ETSU comes in the more rested team with only a one-day layoff for both of those teams. That's another advantage for the Buccaneers. It should be mentioned that maybe that's why Jason Shea, ETSU's head coach, has said publicly he thinks it's going to be a real physical game. Now, that's surprising because ETSU has actually committed more fouls than Wofford has this year. However, if you're looking for some sort of advantage on the free throw line, both teams, their free throw percentage is almost identical this year, but let's just say 69%. I mean, if you want to go down to the nitty-gritty, it goes down to like a thousandth of a point. It's very even between the two teams. They're both 69% free throw shooters, okay? The teams are. ETSU, by the way, is turning the ball over less than Wofford this year. So that's something else that kind of favors the Buccaneers in this game. Personally, though, I kind of think that Wofford is trying to, well, be ETSU. Yeah, you heard me. I'm looking at these names on their roster, and I see guard Ryan Larson, who's a fairly decent guard. And if in the case of Storm Murphy, who's the third leading scorer in the league for the Wofford Terriers, he's averaging 20 points a game, but he only scored 9 points against Mercer on Saturday. So it's a guy like Ryan Larson who picks up the slack for Wofford. Okay, but doesn't Ryan Larson remind you of Ryan Lawson, the Rogersville native, who, of course, was a guard on ETSU's 2003 NCAA tournament team? Actually committed a bad turnover late in the NCAA tournament game against Wake Forest, but, well, regardless. What about B.J. Mack? That kind of reminds you of B.J. Mackey, right? Currently the Wake Forest coach, but of course he was one of Steve Forbes' assistants for 5 years, sitting on a bench of the ETSU Buccaneers. I mean, these names are very similar. What about Trey Holland? Doesn't that remind you of Trey Boyd, the ETSU star? Well, that's a little bit... Yeah, 2 guys named Trey. Okay, but yes, I mean, Ryan Larson of Wofford, Ryan Lawson of ETSU of days of yore, and B.J. Mack and B.J. Mackey. I just kind of thought that was an interesting thing to look at here. The thing is, ETSU is right now clicking on all cylinders, and so this game is going to determine, do they move ahead of the pack, or do they fall to it with 4 teams that would then be on top of the Southern Conference with 2 losses each in the conference? It's going to depend on whether or not Wofford and Jay McCauley can find an Achilles heel on the Buccaneers in this game. Folks, I'm Marky Billson, and I want you to like me on Facebook, and obviously, but I also want you to follow me on Medium, follow me on Twitter, and on YouTube, hit the bell and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You'll find the archives of my old show, as well as these podcasts, which are keeping you up to date with sports in Upper East Tennessee. So until then, I'm Marky Billson.